Welcome to today's awesome assembly. I'm Mr. Etherton and this is Mr. Badger. And what have you got there, Mr. Badger? Oh, he's found a little wooden cross. Let's talk about that, shall we? On Good Friday, we think about the cross and the Easter story. One of our governors suggested that we have a few more crosses up in our school. And they can be quite expensive if you buy a fancy one. So we thought we'd make some of our own. But this one I think is brilliant because it's made of rolled up scrunches of newspaper. And it represents all the bad stuff that's going on in the world, all the things that we're worried about, all the things that people do wrong, and that includes us, can be laid and put on the cross. And Jesus, he will forgive all of that bad stuff. Isn't that good news? Hello and welcome to my awesome gospel. Hello, is that Luke? Hi there. I'm doing some assemblies about Jesus and sticking it on YouTube. Have you heard of YouTube? Yes, I've got YouTube. Just here in my satchel. I can see you. Not that kind of YouTube. Have you heard of the internet? Simon and Andrew had an internet. They were fishermen, and when they took two boats out onto the sea, they had an internet between them to catch the fish. No. Have you got broadband? Yes, I've got broadband around my waist. I'm not that fat, you know. Have you got an Apple iPhone? I haven't got an Apple iPhone. I've got an Apple Deluxe. Have you got an iPad? No, but I wrote about a man who had two iPads. He had one here and one here because he was blind. That was before Jesus healed him though. No, have you got a tablet? Yeah, everyone's got a tablet. I've got the latest Deluxe clay tablet. It's great. You can get faces on it, you can rub it out, you can do pictures on it, like that. Okay, so you wrote a book about Jesus? No, I didn't write a book, I've told you about this. I wrote a scroll on my YouTube. Okay, you can tell me about that. Oh, and do you have Mr. Badger in your story? No, I don't think I missed a badger. I said Mr. Badger, not missed a badger. No, there were sheep and goats and cattle in the stable where Jesus was born, and I wrote about that, but there were no badgers in the stable. Many have tried to report on the things that happened amongst us to help you know that what you have been told is true. And I don't mind reading a bit of my scroll to you. Is that all right, Mr. Etherton? Thanks, Luke. Carry on. It was almost time for the Passover feast, and the leading priests and the teachers of the law were trying to find a way of killing Jesus because they were afraid of all the people. And Judas, he went to the leading priests and some of the soldiers who guarded the temple, and he talked to them about finding a way to hand Jesus over to them. And they were really pleased and agreed to give Jesus a load of money. The day of the Passover came, and Jesus and all the disciples were sitting at a table. Jesus took some bread and he broke it and he gave thanks, and he gave it to the disciples saying, "This is my body, which I'm giving for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, Jesus took the cup and he said, "This cup is a new agreement that God gives his people. This new agreement begins with my blood, which is poured out for you." But then Jesus said, "But one of you will turn against me." And the disciples turned to one another and said, "Who will do that?" Jesus left the city and went to the Mount of Olives as he often did, and his followers went with him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray for strength against temptation." Then Jesus went about a stone's throw away from them, and he knelt down and he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup of suffering, but do what you want, not what I want." When he had finished praying, he went back to his disciples, but they'd fallen asleep. While Jesus was speaking, a crowd came up, and Judas, one of the 12 disciples, was leading them. He came close to Jesus so he could kiss him. Jesus said to him, "Judas, are you using the kiss to give the Son of Man to his enemies?" When those who were standing around saw what was happening, they said, "Lord, should we strike them with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest's ear off. And Jesus said, "Stop, no more of this." And he touched the servant's ear and healed him. Jesus said to the leading priests and soldiers who guarded the temple and the elders, and Jesus said to them, "You came here with swords and clubs, as though I were a criminal. I was with you every day in the temple, and you did not arrest me there. But this is your time, when darkness rules." The men who were guarding Jesus began to make fun and were beating him. They blindfolded him and mocked him. They said, "Prove you are a prophet and tell us who hit you." And they said many cruel things to Jesus. When the day came, the council of the elders and the people, the leading priests and the teachers of the law, they came together, and they led Jesus to the highest court, and they said, "If you are the Christ, the Messiah, tell us." Jesus said to them, "If I tell you, you won't believe me, and if I ask you, you will not answer." And they all said, "Are you the Son of God?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes, you say as I am." They said, "Why do we need witnesses? We've heard him say this ourselves now." Then the whole group stood up and led Jesus to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We caught this man misleading our people. He says we should not pay taxes to Caesar, and he calls himself Christ, a king." And Pilate said to Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "Those are your words." And Pilate said to the leading priests and the people, "I find nothing against this man." But they were insisting, "But Jesus is a troublemaker. He's teaching all around Judea and Galilee, and now he's here." Pilate heard and asked if Jesus was from Galilee. And since Jesus was under Herod's authority, Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, who happened to be in Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, because he'd heard a lot about Jesus and wanted to see him, and was hoping for Jesus to work a miracle. And Herod asked Jesus many questions, but Jesus said nothing. The leading priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, strongly accusing Jesus. After Herod and his soldiers had made fun of Jesus, they dressed him in a kingly robe and sent him back to Pilate. Pilate called the people together with the leading priests and rulers, and he said to them, "You brought this man to me, saying he makes trouble amongst the people, but I've questioned him and found him not guilty." After Herod found nothing wrong with him, he sent it back to us. "Look, what has he done that he should die? So I'll give him a punishment, I'll let him go for free." But the people shouted, "Take this man away! Let Barabbas go free!" And Barabbas had been imprisoned for rioting and for murder. Pilate wanted to let Jesus go, but they shouted again, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" A third time Pilate said to them, "Why? What has he done? I can find no reason to kill him." so I'll have him punished and set him free." But they continued to shout that Jesus should be crucified. The yelling became so loud that Pilate decided to give them what they wanted. So he set Barabbas free and handed Jesus over to them to do as they wished. As they led Jesus away, Simon, a man from Cyrene, was coming in from the fields, and they forced him to carry Jesus' cross to walk behind him. And a large crowd of people was following Jesus, including some women who were sad and crying for him. There were 2 criminals led out with Jesus to be put to death, and when they came to the place called the Skull, the soldiers crucified Jesus and the 2 criminals, with one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." The soldiers threw dice to decide who would get his clothes. And the people stood there watching, and the leaders made fun of Jesus, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he's God's chosen one, the Christ." The soldiers also made fun of him, and they said, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." And at the top of the cross were the words, "This is the King of the Jews." And one of the criminals on the cross began to shout insults at Jesus. "Are you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other criminals stopped him and said, "You should fear God. You're getting the same punishment as he is. We are punished justly, getting what we deserve for what we did. But this man has done nothing." Then he said to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." It was about noon, and the whole land became dark until about 3 o'clock, because the sun did not shine. And Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Father, I give you my life." And after Jesus said this, he died. When the army officer who was there saw what happened, he praised God, and he said, "Surely this man was a good man." When all the people who had gathered there to watch saw what happened, they returned home, beating their chests because they were so sad. But those who were close friends of Jesus, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance and watched. There was a good and religious man named Joseph who was a member of the council. He had not agreed to take part in the plans of the other leaders and the actions against Jesus. And Joseph went to Pilate to ask for the body of Jesus. He took the body down from the cross and wrapped it in a cloth. And he put it in a tomb that was cut out of a wall of rock. The tomb had not been used before. The women who had come from Galilee with Jesus followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how Jesus' body was laid there. And the women left to prepare spices and perfumes for the dead body. On the Sabbath day, they rested in line with the law of Moses. Jesus, his body was in the tomb, and he was dead.
Hi everyone, Mr. Lincoln here, and now I'm going to share with you a prayer for Good Friday. Lord, it seems so strange that we call today Good Friday, when actually it was full of hate, of pain, and of lies. But Lord, through this all, you showed your love to us. Lord, as we remember this day of the sacrifice that Jesus made when he was on the cross, Lord, actually it's a symbol to us of your unfailing love for us all. Thank you, Father. Amen. Amen, everyone.